Greetings everyone. Welcome to the first video in Numbers game series. We will be diving into the thrilling world of stock data analysis. And yes, you've heard me correctly. We will make the data analysis thrilling. I hope you now wonder, why should you listen to me? And true, I'm unlikely to be the best educator, and I stutter at times. Fortunately, it's not recorded live. I spent over a decade working with various institutions, developing predictive models. Data processing always plays a huge role in such projects, and often the expectations about data quality or ability to process it are unrealistic, even on institutional level. Skills are often missing. Trading world even has a higher tendency to be realistic. This tells me that there is a gap in data processing skills. For instance, necessity of backtesting is often talked about, but how many people actually do it? How many traders would like but are missing the required skills? So my mission is to help you fight through that resistance area of the skill gap and eventually fill it. I will be rolling out weekly videos where I'll help you level up your data processing skills. We'll start with the basics and gradually move towards the complex, enabling you to gather data, process it, apply filters, develop models, backtest strategies, and automate the whole framework. But don't worry, I won't bore you to death with technicalities. We'll try to keep it as crisp and sweet as donut. So let's jump to it. Our first video will focus on how to add moving averages to your data. Let's start with an incredibly simple example in order to understand why do we actually need to develop our data transformation skills. In this file, we have AMD data price over time. And let's imagine that we wish to add a 5-day moving average. So first of all, let's ensure that our stock data is ordered by date. And once we do it, we very simply feed last 5 days into our average function. Let's do that. And we can double check whether the computation has been done correctly, and it appears to be so. So yes, so far so good, incredibly simple. Let's now continue to the second example, where we no longer have just data on one ticker, but instead we have data on two stocks, AMD and QQQ. Had we used the same method as before, our moving average would not have been computed correctly at the point of transition from AMD to QQQ data. Let's just very quickly check it. So here we can see that these four values should not have been computed because they're still driven by AMD data, and instead correctly we should have had empty values, and our QQQ computation should have been just triggered from this row where we already have at least 5 days of AMD data. If we say have 100 tickers in our data, we can still potentially go ahead and manually change moving average computation for each and every ticker. But it becomes obvious that it's fairly labor intensive and error prone exercise that of course we would ideally want to avoid. We can still do this computation reasonably well in Google Sheets or Excel. Effectively, we would need to implement a logic that computes moving average only if 5 last observations belong to the same ticker. Let's break it down. First, we will implement the condition that counts number of previous records of the same ticker during last 5 days. So we can apply conditional counting. So what it does is that it counts number of times AMD was present across last 5 observations. And here we can see that we clearly have enough data for computation of moving average, and here we don't. Let's briefly check QQQ data. Yeah, so here we clearly see that we still don't have enough data for computation of the moving average. Here we still have just 2 days, which is not enough for 5-day moving average. And eventually on this row, we would have 5 previous days with QQQ data, and we're interested in computing a moving average for that observation. So now we can go ahead and compute moving average if we have at least 5 days of previous prices. Okay, so let's see what this function does. We check whether we have 5 days of data. In such a case, we compute moving average. And if we have less than 5 days of data on the same ticker, then we assign an empty value. Let's for a moment go to QQQ data. And now we can clearly see that we have correctly not computed moving average for the first 4 observations of QQQ, and we have started only from 5th observation. So you can see that we were still able to perform this computation in Google Sheets. However, complexity is very rapidly increasing. Let's imagine that we had 60 different moving averages, or we were interested in computing some other fields. So this clearly indicates that we need to have some better solution. Let's now try to do the same computation of moving averages for several tickers in R. We will be using the clear and data table packages. You need to first install them and then load these 2 packages. Loading through library function essentially allows to access contents of these 2 packages. The clear data transformation syntax is very elegant and intuitive. This can be to a large extent attributed to its pipe operator, but we will discuss it in more depth later. We have now a very similar data set, however, we have extended it to include more tickers. Let's briefly check it. So we can see that the structure is identical, but now we have additional tickers at our disposal. So let's continue with computation of moving averages using the clear and data table packages. But let's create a plan first. How can we take it forward? If we think about it, first we need to split our data into almost separate smaller data sets for each of the tickers in our data. Separate small data set for AMD, separate small data set for QQQ, separate small data set for SPY, separate small data set for Tesla, etc. And then for each small data set separately, we need to compute a moving average. Let's see how it can be done using the clear. First, we're using our pipe operator to pass our data to our next functions. We will be grouping data by ticker name. And unless we're summarizing data at this point, it effectively allows us to create smaller data sets separately for each ticker name in our data. And we will be creating a new column, moving average, using a function called throw mean from data table package. We're passing a field which we need to use to compute moving average as a parameter and a time lag, which in this case is 5 days, as we still want to compute 5-day moving average. And then we just have to ungroup our data. So now if we run this code. Effectively, we're passing our data set. We're almost creating smaller data sets for each ticker. And for each ticker separately, we're computing moving average using 5 last observations. Let's run this code and address the resulting data set. We have seen that we have added a new column, moving average 5, and we correctly computing moving average for AMD. Let's now check QQQ. We can see that that computation has been done correctly as well. Let's check Tesla. Again, moving average has been computed correctly. So hopefully you're now able to see that this is more efficient implementation. And for instance, I might be interested in adding additional moving average covering last 10 days. And I can do it extremely quickly. Let's run this code again and see the result. And now we have both 5 and 10-day moving averages, and it takes a lot less effort. We're able to extend this computation to all tickers in our data. I love summarizing. We have seen that it might be tough to use Excel or Google Sheets to compute moving averages, especially when size and complexity of your data increases. Furthermore, such a solution cannot be easily automated. It's much more efficient to write a short program that would do such computations for you. I'm sure you're capable of doing that, and it will serve you incredibly well. We will be gradually increasing complexity of the materials in the next videos. Do leave a comment about what data processing mystery you'd like to be addressed the next time. Till then, keep playing the numbers game.